Who wins this thing?
I think Harris is going to win, but it's going to be a squeaker, and I think it'll get contested. We may be doing recount after recounts in a couple states, and if Trump lost barely, he very well will try to find a legal mechanism to get this election to the Supreme Court, believing that they'll side with him.
Doug Brinkley. Dude, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
I think a lot of people know that we've had a long relationship, and I'll just get this out of the way. I mean, you've just been such a amazing friend to me. So I want to thank you for that. And I love hanging, you're one of these people where you'll send me a text or something and it pops up and I'm like, oh God, this is going to be good. What's he up to? We go down, have breakfast, and you just endless storyteller.
I just thought of something.
Tell me.
Have you ever had a tattoo?
No.
I noticed that. Why?
Look, it's a great question. In fact, I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question. I have no problem with tattoos. My son has a couple of tattoos, which are in recent years. Obviously, tons of friends. Most of my friends have tattoos. And not that I would never get a tattoo, but I view, of course, now with technology and some of the stuff that's come out, you can get them taken off. But anything that is going to be there forever, I just want to be really sure that I'm cool with it being there forever. And I've never had a moment in my life where I said, that's it. I want this forever. Because you don't want to get 5, 15, 30 years down the road and say, I wish I wouldn't have done that. So I just...
you have a taste for art and logos, like that hat logo. I don't even know what it is, but it's nice. So I thought I might connect to tattoos, but you're right. You can't. You can switch the hat.
And I've tracked the tattoo phenomenon. It's not even a phenomenon. It's just really, I think it really kind of started. You remember 30, 40 years ago, you see somebody with a tattoo.
Oh yeah.
And you were like, oh no.
Skid Row.
We're in a bad part of town. And, then more you started to see more and more. And now, and I actually collect some artists that started out as tattoo artists. One in particular is Scott Campbell. So Scott, got his start. He's from Houston originally, and he's a wonderful guy. He's a great athlete, great storyteller. He was a tattoo artist, and then he transformed himself into being a fine artist. And so Mr. Cartoon, right?
It's like our Crumb. Remember when he used to do all those cartoons?
You see,
Stedman.
And I like seeing tattoos. It's a great question, but no. And I'm assuming you don't have any tattoos.
I don't, but I did know. Just first time it ever dawned on me talking to you. But I thought it's just being an athlete of that era. Do you ever hear of a Prince, Richard Prince? He was
of course,
appropriation art and all that. Yeah, I remember seeing his photos of people with tattoos, something like in the early 90s, where he did a series of them, and it wakes you up to
it's wild.
The art form.
And they're just so, and I'm cool with all this, but it's so part of our culture and so accepted. My 13-year-old daughter, now she's 13 going on 23. I mean, she's very mature, very outspoken, very confident. She's already said to me, like, hey, Dad, when can I get my first tattoo? I'm like, what? You're 13. They're already thinking about that. And, now Luke's sister, Grace, is working in Denver. I mean, I fully expect there's going to be some trip where we see her. And I'm like, oh, what do we have there? This is new.
They'll hide it from you. Did the piercing... Did she pierce her ears yet? Did you get to that point?
Well, but then
tattoos come 2 years later. They'll either do it or not.
But they do some cool ones. I mean, and as long as it's interesting. So my son Luke, who has these 2 tattoos, he got one because he loves anime. So he got this knife that was somehow part of anime, which I don't know anything about. I'm like, look, if you're into that, do that. And then he wanted to get this other tattoo that also had to do with something he was passionate about. And I said, listen, if you want to do that, let's call Scott. So I called Scott Campbell. And it's very hard to get a Scott Campbell tattoo. And I said, Scott, my son wants another tattoo. And I've just told him, like, if you're going to get one, let's have Scott do it, right? Where it's an actual piece of art. So yeah, it's a great question. I never say never.
Does Scott have a venue somewhere? Like,
he's in downtown Los Angeles.
Right. Yeah. So
yeah,
and you have to get booked in advance.
Oh yeah.
It's like a whole thing.
And it's a unique, his work is, you can see it on Instagram. It's very unique. It's it's not the dragon head or something. It's
novelist Norman Mailer did a thing once. I was making me think of it. Graffiti art.
Yeah.
It can't actually be quality art graffiti. I mean, before Banksy kind of things, but like
that's how Banksy started.
Yeah. And that's a whole other type of fine art. So I didn't know about, I'll look at his tattoo work. I didn't know about it.
And the graffiti artists, which in the day, they were just kids, tagging buildings and alleyways and whatever. Trash bins didn't matter. I mean, and now they're fine. I mean, obviously Banksy is the king. He's one of the most collectible artists out there, but there's, the Barry McGee, Osimios, twins in Brazil. I have a lot of great Osimios work. I mean, these guys are so highly collectible, and they started out as kids running around just tagging buildings.
I think people that follow your career, I think that's a side of you people don't know.
Right.
Your art, that your interest in the art world.
Well,
they know you like music, sport, politics, etc., but not art.
And I never really talk about that, but I agree with you because I experience it. And of course, we just moved back to Austin a year ago. You haven't seen the new house, but I've had people walk into the house and go, "Holy shit. Like, where did all this come from?" OG, Banksy's, Richet's, Francis Bacon's, Kehinde Wiley's. I mean, just people are like, who put all this up? And I'm like, I've been dabbling, but I've been collecting for 25 years and just on my own.
What's the game plan with it? Just to keep it in the family?
Just to keep it. I mean,
and you go trolling at night, like looking online, what's up in a gallery?
I used to go to all the fairs. I don't do that anymore. But you can go to galleries, you can go to fairs, you can buy at auction. If I were to, and I haven't bought in a hot minute, but if I were to jump back in, I would take even more time, right? And identify really young artists. Yeah. And I've always had one rule with art, right? And that's buy what you like. Like, you can go to galleries and you can go to museums and you stand there with the curator or the head of the, they're like, they get very, for lack of a better phrase, they get really woo-woo with it. You're like, do you see it? Oh, it's speaking to me. I'm like, what are you? I'm like, I'm a dumb kid from Plano. Like, I don't know. That looks fucking cool. I think I'll buy that. Like, buy what you like. Don't buy what somebody else says you should or what spoke to them. No, walk around the corner. If it strikes you, maybe you get it.
What I was just looking at is she's so legendary, but Georgia O'Keeffe.
Oh, sure.
Everybody knows her. New Mexico worked.
Yeah.
And she worked out of Texas, Canyon, Texas, as a teacher, like in 1916 to 18, doing watercolors of Palo Duro Canyon and all this.
Oh, beautiful.
But later in life, she had a Ford sedan up there by Taos and would go the back roads of New Mexico and was a photographer.
Yep.
And she did a series, just roads.
Wow.
You should look at it.
Yeah,
just the line, very minimal, but just pictures of a road and all in black and white. Yep. And like a road with mist, a road with it. And I was like, wow, that's a whole dimension of her I didn't know.
Yep. Yeah, her kids are like, this teacher's crazy. She's always taking pictures.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we're talking about her. I want to talk about a couple things. Obviously, it's, what are we? Gosh, a little over a month and a half away from what just seems to be has to be, at least in my lifetime, certainly, craziest political presidential races. And so I want to talk about that. And for folks who maybe don't know, but should know, I mean, you are, as I tell people, because people say, "Oh, you haven't on." I said, "Well, Doug is the foremost presidential historian alive." Now, maybe there's somebody else, but he's the guy. This is what he loves. This is what he's passionate about. But this shit is so weird. So I want to get into that, and I just
I think, Lance, we're making a mistake, the United States, of running these elections so long. They go on for like 2 or 3 years of just, and it creates almost a fatigue. Yet we're addicted to the reality narrative of it, so we lean forward, and I wish we could be like the European countries, maybe run them a little shorter, 6 months where we focus, but alas, we don't. It has been a strange time this summer. I think people in history will bookend it with the debate of Trump and Biden, and Biden being very listless.
Tough to watch.
Yeah.
No matter what side you're on.
No matter what side.
Very tough to watch. I'll never forget it.
Never. I know. And in some ways, you depending how you feel politically, you either felt sorry for him or embarrassed, or you were glad that he was screwing up. And that set in motion, it seems to me, a whole kind of inferno of things, mainly at the exact same time the Democrats are looking for an escape hatch, Kamala Harris. You have Butler, Pennsylvania, with Donald Trump being shot. And yes, it's a nick of the ear, but that building wide open there. And, how did somebody get that opportunity? And then the oddness of Milwaukee, where Trump came in as a unity person, but the only memory we'll really take away from Milwaukee Republican Convention will be the ear, the bandaged ear. Right. And then his 10 minutes of unity talk, and then back to Trump invective. And then Harris coming out, and to the surprise of myself, the Republicans were caught off guard by her, as if they had no plan. I think when we
talking about the debate, or just
I'm talking about Harris. I think they didn't think I don't think they imagined Biden would give up power. Right. It's not common that somebody abdicates power. And the fact that Biden was convinced to do it, why was he convinced? Well, he got COVID. He then was there in Delaware on the beach and reflected for 48 hours. And people like Nancy Pelosi.
Well, there's the talk. I mean, the talk from, reliable people was that Nancy Pelosi was
calling state reps and calling on the ground.
And sat with him and Joe Biden.
Yeah, and Chuck Schumer. But Pelosi and Obama's the way Obama dealt with it. But at any rate, he did. And she came out of the gate with a kind of strange momentum. She almost seemed magical for a while. Very few errors. Most people would have made them. She seemed to fall right into the role. I was in Chicago at the convention, and it was a huge party success. But it wasn't like the Republican convention about Donald Trump in Chicago. You had a smorgasbord of people, Bill Clinton, then Hillary Clinton, then Michelle Obama, and Barack Obama, and Oprah. And, it became like that. And so they closed the Biden gap. And since then, it's been a dead heat. There only been the one debate, and Harris won. She did well introducing herself to the public. I don't know in a second debate if all the facial gestures she made, which were choreographed, flawlessly. I'm not sure a second round of the same ones might play as well, but and Trump misunderstood her prosecutorial power, and she unleashed it, and yet Trump always knows how to reclaim a media narrative.
Well, back to that original debate with Biden for most people know where I stand on this. I do try to stay out of it. And if somebody forced me to talk about it, I would say, look, I just wish we had better choices. And I mean that. That's wait, this is America? This is it? All these smart and rich people and passionate people and generous people, this is it. So that's my
two people that would be in their 80s as president.
But here we are, and I will say on that first debate, I've met Joe Biden many times, and it was a perfectly nice guy. That was, for as hard as that was to watch, I thought Donald Trump in that first debate, he came out and I said, oh my God, this guy, because it isn't just standing up there and wanting to be president and being smart. Man, you got to train, you got to prep, you have to get grilled, you have to do mock debates. And I said, wow, this guy is ready. This is not the normal. I said, the Democrats, whatever, we got a problem. Like this guy's
he
way more
comported
polished.
himself.
Yes.
So well, yeah.
Then you fast forward to the second debate, and it was, you're right. She is a prosecutor. What do prosecutors do, right? They are used to getting their story across to a jury, to a group of people, whether it's 12 jurors or 330 Americans. Right. She had that, and she was trained up, and he was not. And so it was, but nonetheless, what I struggle with, and I'm so curious about, and nobody has a crystal ball other than maybe you, can we ever get back to normal, right? Is this, and I don't know what normal is, right? I mean, I can remember a lot of presidents, and I remember how mad people were at George Bush and Bill Clinton and even Jimmy Carter. But in Ronald, you look back at Reagan, you're like, but could you ever get back to a place where, I don't know who the candidate is on the Democratic side, and on the Republican side, maybe it's a Mitt Romney-esque person.
I think we'll get back to it. But
that's good. I'm glad you hear you say that.
I do, but not with this, not anytime soon. I mean, it is bitter out there. Yeah. Trump is very decisive and dividing kind of figure. People either he's very into what he says, you got to buy into the act 100% or not, and I think 30% of the American public are diehards for Trump. Now, I know more than that, but that 30%, if he runs a third party 4 years from now, that 30% will come with him. Right. So he can be a disruptive agent for another cycle he will, well, it's going to be close and he will contest if he loses. He'll say the vote wasn't counted in Pennsylvania properly. He'll continue to make a kind of mayhem out of it. In 2000, there was that moment where things could have unspooled with Al Gore,
the hanging chads
of Florida, and eventually, at that moment, I remember when James Baker, Secretary of State, he was representing Bush, and he was shooting his cufflinks in Florida. Power broker coming to Florida, counting chads. And Warren Christopher, because a Democratic Secretary of State, was very mild and old school gentlemanly, and it was clear aggression was going to do it. It got to the Supreme Court, and they decided. We forget that in early 2001, a lot of people, Democrats, thought Gore should have been president. He won the popular vote. That George W. Bush wasn't the real president. Well, boom, 9/11 happened. Right. And he had like a 90% approval rating, George W. Bush, those first weeks when we all put American flags in our lawn and so I don't want it to be a disaster that pulls us together. We don't want some event. So the question will become a new generation will have to come up. We'll have to have new talent that pivots center right, center left, but doesn't go with the social media extreme.
Well, but Vance isn't exactly long in the tooth. I mean,
he surprises me.
But he's part of the younger generation. I mean, you could have more of that.
That's a good point.
That's what I'm saying. Have we set the sort of thresholds so far apart that people just say, well, I guess that's what, even if it's not what they believe, because by the way, we know a lot of this shit they don't believe.
Oh, no. I mean,
but they got to play the game and they got to act. And they just say, I got to be extreme like that. I mean, there's not a lot of things that makes me want to
hope it doesn't continue.
I agree. Today's show brought to you by Ketone IQ. Now, we often hear that fasting and exercise are good for the brain. HVMN launched the world's first drinkable ketone in 2017. Ketone IQ is their latest innovation on ketones with improved effectiveness, taste, and cost. Ketone IQ delivers clean fuel that can cross the blood-brain barrier. I actually took one of these this morning right before my workout. Unbelievable. Supplying my brain and body sustained energy, focus, and sharpness, putting you in flow, lasting for hours. Ketone IQ also has a partnership with Visma Lisa Bike. Riders take Ketone IQ throughout the entire stage, and they're also working with a team on a bunch of research studies, how to best improve the process. 30% off your first subscription order, plus a free 6-pack when you use the link ketone.com/ The Move. That's ketone.com/The Move. I know you're listening to The Forward, but the link is ketone.com/The Move.
But, Vance, when he wrote Hillbilly Elegy, and Ron Howard did a movie, and he's a Yale law constitutional guy. But then he started making little money, and Peter Thiel gave him, millions to run for Senate in Ohio. And he took that internet tech money, and then he turned his back on all those people and recognized, I better go full Trump, because you can't have one bit of difference with Trump. Right. And so he just does whatever. And I think Vance was a product of the Trump boys, Eric and Donald Jr. They befriended him. They saw him as like part of their pack. He ran well with, hung out with them well. It may turn out to be a fundamental mistake of Trump. I mean, they had Doug Borglum, a billionaire in North Dakota, who's more mild-mannered, but made a lot of money with Microsoft as popular governor. He may have been a more effective VP, or Tim Scott may have helped bring in some African-American vote, although I'm not convinced. Or Rubio would have been a huge thing. Yeah. But in hindsight, I think they thought, well, he'll do what we want, Vance, and he's proven to do that when you're doubling down on dogs and cats and Springfield, Ohio. Tim, I did not see the Minnesota governor, Tim Walz, coming. I saw why he was on a short list. I saw him on MSNBC. Like, wow, what a great hit he just did. Yep. I thought, that they might go straight for Josh Shapiro and play for Pennsylvania, because so many electoral votes there, and Shapiro's popular, and just go right for that golden prize. But alas, Walz is given a lift, kind of a Midwest populist, the teacher, the coach, till this point. And we'll see how Vance and Tim Walz do on their debate. They will have a debate. Yeah. I think it's debatable whether or not there will be another Trump. I'm not sure Harris. There will be. I don't think, It doesn't seem to be in the interest of either in some ways. Certainly, I don't see how Trump wants to go against the prosecutor. It's funny. I get a lot of, I have friends from across both sides. And, my Republican friends will say, well, she's not even, she won't even do interviews, and she's not out there. She's not talking about her policies and her plans and et cetera, et cetera. And all the while, and these are all just facts, right? She's going up in the polls. And so I say, my friends, I said, well, gosh, I mean, if you're in charge over there, you're like, let's just keep doing what we're doing. Exactly. I understand that this side over here is like, well, she won't do interviews. She won't tell us her plan. Meanwhile, the numbers are going up. Well, if you're the coach or the coordinator or whatever you want to call them, well, you just say, I think we just keep doing what we're doing. That's their strategy. The danger is, Lance, Woodrow Wilson used to say, in politics, caution is a sign of extreme selfishness. If you're overcautious. The danger of Harris, if she plays that too much and doesn't have breakout moments between now and then, or she learned, too many of the Biden people learned Biden could be a COVID president in Delaware. We used to call them the front porch presidents. William McKinley ran for president and never left Canton, Ohio. Wow. She's, I think, splitting the difference pretty well. She's frenetically campaigning, giving her speeches, giving her rallies, but avoiding that one-on-one press moment. She doesn't want to make one mistake that can be, swung back at her. So if she loses, the caution that she's showing, which seems smart now, would be questioned in history. And what do you make? Because there was so much written and reported and opined on after the second debate, the actual Trump and Harris debate about the moderators. I'm curious, because I watched and I saw the performances and I obviously listened to the questions. But so much was, obviously from Fox News and other folks on the right that this was rigged. They gave her leading questions. What was your honest, objective view of their questions? I thought that Trump always demonizes the media. That's because when Walter Cronkite left CBS in 1981. journalism had a 70% approval rating. Today, it's like 14% approval. So Trump covers himself in advance. He was saying it's, the corrupt fake news CNN, but I'll do the debate, corrupt ABC. He has a lawsuit going on against George Stephanopoulos, Trump, at ABC. So if he failed, he would have a scapegoat, and he took it. I thought the moderators were pretty good. They gave Trump 5 minutes more time. They probably could have followed up on Harris 1 or 2 times more than they did. But Trump unleashes so many falsehoods, one after the other, that they felt obliged to call him out on some because Jake Tapper and Dana Bash didn't. And that serves Trump's to benefit. What I think that first debate, the mic, you're right though. Trump came in and the way the microphones worked, muting, he was containable. She really prepped because she believed, I wouldn't have believed that the crowd size would have still gotten under his skin. Yeah. Obama unleashed a killer line at the Democrat convention about crowd size when he moved his hands, it's in a manhood way. But that Trump wasn't ready for her to hit him with that. Yeah. And he kept doubling down. I have bigger crowds. So that moment he was acting very foolish. I thought he may have been, it showed me an underpreparedness as if he arrived really going on gut.
Well, I mean, how about the fact that, look, I'm not trying to pick apart Donald Trump's debate performance, but anybody could see this. Didn't matter who you're voting for. Right. The fact that you didn't consider or know or constantly think of the image on the television, it's always a split screen. There are times they focus on the person who's talking, but most of the time it's a split screen. So that means when you're just standing there, well, everybody's looking at you too. Like they're looking at her talk or you talk, and then what are you going to do with that time? Well, if you turned the volume off and you watched, you're like, wow, this is not good. Like, and she, on the other hand, clearly had been coached up, where it's like, look, when he's talking, keep in mind you're also on the television screen. And she had some smirks, but it wasn't just like this.
Didn't just stare.
I mean, just because you're not talking doesn't mean you can lay down.
One of the problems the right has done is they've demonized Kamala Harris, and they started believing their own BS that she was a weak, worse VP. She has a lot of charisma. And she does a lot of it, and her smile is Obama-esque. She can enter a room and it can light up. Yep. And then her priceless facial gestures. And you're right. Yep. Back in one thing, Lance, everybody thinks we've always had presidential debates. We have not. Lincoln Douglas was about the Illinois Senate, the first presidential debate ever. Nixon versus Kennedy. It's people who watched on television the 4 debates thought that Kennedy did well. They were watching his body language, watching his calmness, and Nixon seemed sweaty and beady and what you were saying at the wrong moment, looking odd. People that listen on radio thought that Nixon had won. And so it is at all these televised debates. It's a visual medium, and it's not just about what you're saying when it's your turn. It's how you're acting and looking. And she pulled both off. That's like that. I mean, it's one of the best, maybe the best debate performance in U.S. history was Kamala Harris and Trump, because she didn't put a lot of mistakes on the table, both on her mannerisms and also on her substance, although there are a lot of talking points, and the moderators did not do the follow-ups with her on some things that would have trapped her.
Right. Well, there's this kind of, for me, I keep thinking about cable news. I mean, because what you said at the top, you said you think these election cycles are just too long, right? I mean, the NFL season is, 5 months or 6 months, and you get a little break, a complete break. But they are long, right? But with that, and you talked about Walter Cronkite, right? Well, when the approval rating was 70 and now it's 14%. Well, what's happened since then, right? We don't have 3 channels to choose from, right? You go with not ABC, NBC, and CBS. You've now got cable news, and they want this thing. They want nothing more than to keep this shit running constantly. Yes. And then let's mix in a little, natural disaster, a plane crash, a shooting or something that keeps it. They want it to keep playing out. But there's 2 things that on the cable news thing that I've just observed. The guy I like most, and I shouldn't say I really can't. I shouldn't say I don't like cable news because I watch it. Now I try to watch it all. I do this on purpose with my family. I'll watch some CNN, but if we're watching 10 minutes of CNN, well, we're going to switch right over and we're going to watch 10 minutes of Fox. And then we're going to go, we're not just watching one. I think that's a shitty way for your kids to absorb this stuff. Even if they're not paying attention, they're getting some of it. But my favorite guy on cable news is John King.
Oh, me too. He is amazing.
So John King, and he just seems goat. he seems neutral to me. I could be wrong, but I love him with all of his maps. And if she wins this county and he wins this state, and then he's got all the numbers and the electoral college. But he said before the debate, he said if Donald Trump brings up Haitian immigrants eating people's pets in some small town in Ohio, he has lost. And I thought, well, surely. There's just no way. There's no way he does that. Well, he did. But King sitting there just says, listen, this is what I think. If he, by chance, has the nerve to bring this up, it's over. And he did. The last thing I'll say about cable news, and we're talking about these debates, and this drives me crazy. Right, we watched the first debate, Trump and Biden. And it was just so sad to watch. I don't care what side you're on. When that debate ended and they cut to CNN, I had it on CNN for that debate, the panel sitting up there, right? And it was I think it was Anderson Cooper, Axelrod. I think Axelrod's great. You probably had a John King there. You had some Republican analysts. Across the Republicans said, the Democrats said, this is a disaster. We couldn't believe what we just saw. We cannot imagine that it could ever be this bad. Now, this last debate, right? Trump and Harris. Well, it was flip-flopped. Then I watched the panel on Fox. You go to that panel, they said, well, he did amazing. We think, he clearly won. She got some licks in, but I'm like, were we all watching?
Yeah.
How do you have to call it the way you see it?
I did Morning Joe, MSNBC, the morning after that first debate, Biden-Trump. And to your point, I just said it's over for Biden. I actually said he needs to step down and it's going to be Kamala Harris, because I knew enough of presidential history. They're not going to be able to do this open convention where 8 people are in Chicago.
Yeah, Gavin Newsom.
Not going to happen.
Shapiro.
So it's either Biden or her. He just blew it, and they're going to have to elevate Kamala Harris.
Well, there were a lot of reasons for that, too.
Yes.
The money that had been raised was earmarked. Exactly. They'd have to send it back, hope to get it back, sent back to them.
For all those reasons. But the bottom line is he's done, Biden, in my mind. There's no way he's going to recover from that. John King, who incidentally is not only great on television, a wonderful guy and a great sports fan. He goes to all the NBA games.
Cool.
He's on floor seats. He's a sports freak. I did not know he said that about I missed it. Yep. But it's prescient of him. The thought that Trump thinks he's going to sell the dogs and cats in Springfield as a way to bring attention that it's not just the border with Mexico. That's the problem, but people are flying in and they're coming in and demonizing Haitians like that, which he called shithole country Haiti before and the like. I don't know what he was thinking. There was probably, he likes to defend Bobby Kennedy Jr. because there was an accusation of the dead bear or eating a dog. And then he was defending J.D. Vance, who did the Cat Ladies. Somehow in Trump's mind, his showbiz mind, he thought that was a winning zap.
Yeah. And I thought King called it. I mean, I mean, he must have been watching going,
oh my God, I called
that.
I did.
Well,
yeah, I would not have thought that Trump would have gone that route, but his philosophy is trying to keep a kind of white America and make sure towns aren't being replaced by people of color from places like Haiti.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I can see all sides of it. I mean, I think there's also a part of me. I mean, look, nobody wants fentanyl streaming into our country. Nobody wants rapists and murderers coming into the country. But at the same time, we've had immigration for a long, long time. Should it just open the border and let it happen? No. I mean, but there has to be. That's my. I don't have the answer.
Lance,
but immigration is not going away. It's just how you responsibly.
Yeah, and I wouldn't give Biden Harris incidentally high marks on the way they dealt with the border.
Right.
It's not been good. But I think Trump channels, like when we do look at presidents like Dwight Eisenhower, successful two-termer, most of us think his lowest moment, Ike, was Operation Wetback. Trump elevates it as Eisenhower's great moment. Not the building of the interstate highway system, not creating of NASA, not sending National Guard into Little Rock to deal with civil rights, but his block the border, send them back, Operation Wetback of Ike. Same with FDR. I've heard Trump say, look, I'm a conservative. I'm not an FDR guy, but he's a leader because he put Japanese in internment camps. That's pure Trump. He's taking what some people think is the lowest moment at FDR and elevating it. Somewhere in Trump, there's you come to the conclusion that it's not just he wants an America that had a power structure that's different than it is today. It was white men running the country, and that's rapidly changing. The demographics are changing. And I grew up in Ohio, Lance, and Ohio got screwed in the 90s because, NAFTA came in. It was both Clinton and Bush. Ross Perot in 1992 got 19% of the vote on saying the suck and sound of your jobs are going to Mexico, blaming. What I wouldn't have predicted as a younger historian is I thought that they would blame corporations more. And, why did, Ford build their factory in China? Why did? But in the end, in the Midwest, they don't blame the companies. They blame other factors. And because the companies were giving them checks and the federal government's making them pay taxes, and the labor movement kind of petered out. Labor was a big deal in the 60s.
You don't hear much about it.
Biden stoked it a little bit. He went to the picket line. But I mean, back in the 60s and 70s, big labor was so powerful. Right. Now it's less and less. And people like Elon Musk and others are liking states that don't have labor unions. Find places where the union movement isn't a hindrance.
Yeah, or robots.
Or robots.
I mean, I've not been to the facility here in Austin, but apparently there's not a lot of humans.
A lot of humans, a lot of robots, and I was reading recently about trucking industry going to be robotic trucking.
Yeah, well, I think of course. I mean, in the future, coming. Look, we have Waymo taxis here in Austin now, and I spend a lot of time in San Francisco. You see them everywhere. There is no human driving that car. Well, I mean, come on, let's be real. At some point, we're all going to get on, American Airlines flight 372 to Newark or whatever, and it will not be a human flying that airplane.
To my point, right. I was just picking trucking. But it's the same thing. It's trucking.
Which, by the way, I wanted to get there, but I don't have a problem with that. If you said this thing's going to make the perfect decisions, now I don't have a problem with that.
And then the only problem is, and I don't either, but it's a deculturalization.
Well, that's
like the end of the truck stop. The end. I mean, but maybe we're just nostalgic, like at the end of that culture of the road and those places. But the culture in airports is simply shopping mall culture, at any rate, with fast food restaurants. So I don't feel there's the cultural loss in commercial air, but something about the mythology of the music, Little Feat Willin' and the convoy radio,
so what
country truck.
Who wins this thing? If you had to.
I think Harris is going to win, but it's going to be a squeaker, and I think it'll get contested. I worry that we may be doing recount after recounts in a couple states, and if Trump lost barely, he very well will try to find a legal mechanism to get this election to the Supreme Court, believing that they'll side with him the way they did in 2000 with George W. Bush, meaning the makeup of the court favors Trump.
Of course.
And so that's his plan B. He'll again say he didn't really lose. It's rigged, do the lawsuits, figure out if one can make it something out of a lot of vote counting. I think, though, I worry about the poll stations. I worry making sure our poll workers are safe. Look, there's a lot of there's an uptick in terrorism going on.
Yep.
I mean, people are just trying to kill Netanyahu, and not just Trump. I mean, there's you're feeling this era of assassins in the bushes.
Well, last week, Donald Trump, teeing off on number 7, guy on the.
And again, how does somebody there apparently 12 hours hanging around?
Yeah, that makes.
I don't know, but never discount how government can be semi-dysfunctional. I think we create Secret Service and CIA agents as these infallible warriors, and they're just humans that are goofing up a lot, But I'm for increased Secret Service protection if you're going outdoor venues, golf courses, you doing these big fairgrounds and all. William McKinley was assassinated in Buffalo by an anarchist who pretended he had a broken arm and had a cast and had the gun in it. And he did a receiving line and it looked like the poor guy's broken arm, and they got up to McKinley, close as you and I are, and popped him, shot him like that. And not only did McKinley die and Theodore Roosevelt get sworn in, but then the big fight, Lance, was the big new thing was Buffalo was doing electric chairs. As in Thomas Edison had an electric chair and Westinghouse had an electric chair. So they were vying for who would get to kill the assassin with the new marvel of an electric chair. And then cutting it back to art, when the Rosenbergs got executed in a chair for being spies, Andy Warhol in the 60s did a death and disaster series of the electric chair that the Rosenbergs were executed in, showing the strap and all that, but then did it in neon green and hot pink and crazy colors. And why? Because he said we just deal with like murders and car wrecks in America. We deal with death and disaster as an entertainment. Pretty frightening statement that Warhol was saying. So, whenever there's something violent, something, an Al Capone moment, we all lean in and see what's going on in America. And probably the good news, is hard to get out there. A lot of great people everywhere.
Yeah, of course.
Hard to get it out there.
Yeah. Well, again, it's the cycle of cable news. I'm convinced. Once we got away from the big three, it's to be expected. It is competitive, right? Oh my God, there's not 3 of us anymore. There's now 30 of us. Well, we have to get people to pay. It doesn't matter what, so that stuff pops.
I have to live with, I've been dead wrong. I thought January 6th was going to disqualify Trump. I thought when you heard Mitch McConnell and every Republican turning on him, I thought that's the end. But
he had that 30% that weren't going away. So they were already starting with it. Nobody else had that base that they could start with.
And then the Justice Department, Merrick Garland, went slow. Like he was so worried about showing he's not on a witch hunt to get Trump. how many court cases can we, the spin, and then
I think those have actually helped.
Yeah, the what has
the cases, that's
it turned Trump into an outlaw. He's our only outlaw president, and there's President's Club and there's the outlaw, but we worship.
We need Hunter Thompson back.
Hunter Thompson, but we like Billy the Kid and Jesse James.
Oh, we're gonna
and Dillinger, and meaning you go to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, or Tombstone, Arizona, and you look at memorabilia in a gift shop, they're celebrating the outlaw culture as much as law enforcement.
Today's show also brought to you by OneSkin. We're talking about dry skin, deeper wrinkles, all those things. These are just a few of the visible signs of aging. Something that today's sponsor, OneSkin, knows all about. Now, I'm not totally over concerned with my aesthetics, but I do want to keep my skin healthy as I get older. Just turned 53. That's why I love their topical supplements. They actually help your skin feel and behave younger as you age. Think about that for a second. The peptide OS1, scientifically proven to decrease lines and wrinkles, boost hydration, and help with the thinning skin that comes often with age. Don't just take my word for it. They've got over 4,000 five-star reviews for their full line of face, body, sun, and travel-size products. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. Get started today with 15% off using the code THEMOVE at oneskin.co. Again, that's 15% off. Head on over to oneskin.co. Use the code THEMOVE. Shifting to that, because I see you on cable news all the time talking about this kind of stuff, which we just ran through. But I love documentaries, and anybody that listens to this show regularly knows. I mean, if it comes out, it could be sports, it could be history, it could be politics, it could be crime. Like I love these, some crime ones. And so I land on this Wyatt Earp documentary on Netflix. Just came out. Wyatt Earp. What is it called? It's called Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy War. And I thought, well, 6 episodes. Yeah, I travel all the time. Shit. Download. So I'm watching this whole thing, and lo and behold, there you are. Of course. But this fucking story, I had no idea. And I pay attention to this stuff, like the amount of influence and power. I mean, everybody thinks about the shootout at the OK Corral. They know the name. They're like, oh, wow, that must have been a bunch of cowboys just shooting at each other. Well, yeah, but how Wyatt Earp came to be there, the influence of Wells Fargo, the influence of JP Morgan, nobody knew that story.
Yeah.
And not only those two, but the royal family, right? And of course, America was much smaller then, and silver and gold were so much more powerful, and we didn't have railroads. And
we were trying to pay off Civil War debt, and they were doing it by the government in Arizona, convincing Europeans that Arizona wasn't lawless and that you could.
Well, the royal family is asking. JP Morgan is actually, and if y'all haven't seen it, you have to watch this. It's cool because it's, as I describe it, it's a cinematic documentary. So this gets played out on the screen. So Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, they're being played by actors, and they'll show a scene or a couple scenes, and then they'll cut to guys like you. Right. And they'll sort of tell the story of the background of what happened. And then they'll go back to telling the story cinematically. It was very well done.
Oh, man, I appreciate it. It is. And I do think it splits a lot of differences. It creates entertainment value. It's educational. It brings the best of Hollywood, but it also allows the real history to come through. And everybody knows the name Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, but nobody really knows the whole story. And I never thought of this before, but do you remember, Lance, a movie when we would have been young, Warren Beatty, Reds? Do you remember that?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't.
He did a thing on, he played a journalist of World War I, John Reed, Warren Beatty, but he took real people like Studs Terkel or people that were alive and put them mixed in with the regular. And I remember I thought that might catch on, like if we're doing and it never really did. But I think Netflix now, this Wyatt Earp is going to be a model because you get Ed Harris and he's, a tremendous voice. And then you can keep the budget under control.
Right.
where it doesn't blow up on you.
Yeah, these are not. I mean, the acting was great, but
the
not
reviews
anybody.
have been like Wall Street Journal and on and on. I mean, people are loving it, and I think they'll do a lot more of those Netflix. I've just worked on one on Winston Churchill for 12. It's going to be 12 hours on Churchill. Wow. Netflix is doing. And so
he's been in a bunch of stuff lately. I mean, obviously the Queen show they had, he's in there a lot, but there was another one I saw.
People love Churchill. A lot of people should. But, you know, Churchill was a great writer, and he wrote volume after volume of the history of the Second World War. He won a Nobel Prize for Literature, Winston Churchill. He wrote that well. And so he was able to spin his own story where FDR, smart. FDR died. He didn't have a memoir. There's no FDR memoir. He died in April 12th, 1945, no memoir. So Churchill's lore continues. And in the United States, he's been adopted by conservatives that just worship Churchill more than any American president. You know, the people that like Reagan a lot, like Churchill a lot. Multifaceted guy, Churchill. So I think that's probably a plus in our life. People are, if you can get it, look, it's a visual age. So people are podcast and visual. That's where it's at. And so if you're getting eyeballs at Netflix and keeping them glued, it's at least a good place to get started on learning some history.
Well, and it's just, you know, it wasn't hilarious, but I was like, man, I'm clueless. Like Wells Fargo, you know, that's our bank. Like if I need a little cash, I go down to the Wells Fargo and go to the ATM, and that's our bank.
And they've survived that.
But if you look at the logo of Wells Fargo, and most people, I know I never looked at the logo. Well, there's a horse and buggy on there.
They won all,
they were transporting the silver and the gold. Like that's how this thing, folks, that's how it started. This isn't where your ATM is. I mean, it is now, but back then,
you don't go too wrong in history if you focus on transportation, oddly. Right. I mean, you know, like when Thomas Jefferson was president, he kept talking about the national road that'll go from the east to the west. And then each generation, you know, by 1920s, we did federal highways that are numbered that we all live on now, like Route 66. It becomes storied. And then in the 50s, we did the Eisenhower Interstates, which is the largest public works project in world history. But in these intervening years before the automobile, you know, there's, you know, things like the steamboat and railroad. Yeah. Even the 1870s bicycle.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, if as history goes, it was right around the turn of the 20th century. Roads, we had roads, right? We had dirt roads, right? And then we had horse and buggy. They were fine with dirt roads, maybe even some cobbles in the city centers. And then the bicycle became such a mode of transportation. Really people don't know this, but they do. The League of American Wheelmen is who petitioned the Congress to start paving the roads because the dirt roads didn't work for the bicycle. So then they were like, well, shit, all these people on bikes, that's how they're getting around. We're going to have to start paving. So if that doesn't happen, well, then the car doesn't work that great either.
You know, have you ever thought about writing a book on the history of the bicycle?
No, I haven't thought about that.
A short book?
If you write it, I'll do it.
It might be, you know, also, when I was talking about steamboat, you know, it's connected to, you're talking about Wells Fargo with the silver and all that. So if you were a farmer in Ohio, you would grow your crops and you get to the Ohio River and you'd go down the Ohio and then down the Mississippi to New Orleans, and you'd sell your produce for Dix notes, where Dixieland comes from. It was a currency of New Orleans. So you'd say, I'm going to Dixieland, meant payday. But once you sold it, you'd hit the brothels, you hit the bars, you'd hit whatever. And then you'd have to get a keelboat, which were very athletic. You know, think of linebackers in the NFL with poles along the banks like the Mississippi going upriver, poling just to Natchez, Mississippi. And then you would hike from Natchez, Mississippi to Nashville, or the Natchez Trace. Right. And it was a robber's highway. That's where the term really in America, the highwaymen would rob you because you were loaded with your money from your harvest. So people would hide in the woods.
Highway robbery.
Yeah, highway robbery. Well, truly. And it became a bit, Lewis and Clark of the Lewis and Clark expedition committed suicide on the Natchez Trace. It was an amazing artery. Well, in the West, they're getting all that silver, let's say Arizona silver mines, but they're transporting it.
Yep.
You had to have security, the best horsemen, best weapons, and all of that to protect.
I mean, these were, it's the cowboy, they call it the, what's the title? Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy War. Well, that sounds like Wyatt Earp versus a cowboy. Well, there was a gang, and they were called, the Cowboys. Right, we would never think of that now, but that was a gang, right? That was their job. They would not just rob these carts with or buggies with silver and gold. They'd rob cows. They just went around and robbed shit. But their gang was called the Cowboys. Ike Clanton and his brother and the whole crew. But it was influencing all of this. And J.P. Morgan's has this grand plan to buy up all of the, going back to transportation. His plan is to buy all of all the railroads in the U.S. And he's getting there, trying to get backing from the King of England. And the King of England hears that, wait a minute, I'm hearing about this, the King of England. Yeah. What is going on in Tombstone, Arizona? Your country seems like it's a mess. I mean, the fact that was the conversation.
Yeah. And they were very interested. It's not in that Netflix on Wyatt Earp, but, the British got very into the Wild West because Buffalo Bill, Wild Bill Cody would come there with this show with Annie Oakley shooting ornaments. And so the royal family were like feted all of these ruffians. And they would, and Buffalo Bill would captured Indians, native leaders like the Apache Geronimo, ladies and gentlemen, Geronimo. And, it was very sad, that some of the so-called famous warriors now being on this grand show. And, maybe, Lance, in the end, that whole Wild West narrative of our country may be the great mythology of our country. It may be bigger than the building of New York immigrant story, which is gigantic. But boy, the Western lore never ends.
Well, you're just reminded when you watch, because look, it's easy to sit here in 2024 and say, my kids are always on their phones. AI is going to take over the world. Politics are fucking crazy. Like, this is a mess. Can't we just go back? But then you watch something like this, and we're 1881. Doc Holliday has tuberculosis. They tell him he ends up in Tombstone, Arizona, because they tell him to move to a drier climate.
Yep.
Like any of these little things that we can fix in 5 minutes now or 5 seconds. I mean, you were smoked, right? You lived to be.
And the fact that Wyatt Earp lived into the cinema age.
He did. He went on to work in Hollywood.
The real Wyatt Earp. And Tom Mix was a pallbearer at his funeral. Yep. And, it's a fascinating moment because you did get photography, so people could take it's like one photo or two of people. So if you go to Deadwood, South Dakota or Tombstone, the old postcard racks of the faces of these people. The lore lives on. And incidentally, those kind of books sell well. Yep. The best writer of that genre of capturing the real West history was the novelist Larry McMurtry from Texas.
Sure. From Austin.
Yep. Larry was good.
Yeah.
He really knew.
Of course.
He used to, Lance, I worked at Rare Book Used Books and when I was in graduate school at Georgetown, and Larry had a bookstore called Booked Up. And he would buy, and I'd go in it, but at night, I'd be night manager, and he'd come in with the dog and just buy stacks of books, Larry McMurtry. And he had just done the Leaving Cheyenne, which Paul Newman made into HUD. Mm-hmm. And then he wrote The Last Picture Show, great, classic. And Sybil Shepherd, do you remember her?
Of course.
One morning I came by Larry's because I would made a little bit of money at his bookstore just bundling, and it was shipping out like a little bit. He came down with her. It was like, wow, man, and I was going to punk bars in DC, like the 930 Club or all the would-be poets.
Was 930 Club around then?
Yeah, Discord Records.
Wow.
In the 930 Club, Fugazi and Black Flag, all those people would come. But that night scene, would-be poets screaming their angst. And then I was like, here's Larry and his torn, just disheveled with he was a very interesting guy, Larry McMurtry.
Yep.
His son, James McMurtry, is a good songwriter.
Huge.
I wish people understood what a great songwriter is. He doesn't get the credit, but he's one of our best.
Yeah. You know? And we've lost that. I mean, let's just be, I mean, if we were talking before the show, just, about which, who's living here in Austin on the music side, right? And obviously one of the richest histories anywhere. And there's not many, a lot of the locals. I mean, that's why I was so surprised that 930 Club is still around in DC. I mean, that'd be like us thinking, talking about Liberty Lunch in Austin or La Zona Rosa or even the original anthems, Threadgills, all these. It's now those folks are in Lockhart, they're in Bastrop, they're in Wimberley. They're out in maybe Marble Falls, or somewhere else. Kansas City. There's a lot of talk about folks, sort of digging the Kansas City vibe. But yeah, he got.
Willie Nelson survives. And how did you know Willie very well? How did that come about?
Boy, how did that come about? I think I first met Willie. He was doing, it would have been late 90s. He, because he was a runner for many, many years. And there's a bunch of, you can see the pictures online with him and his New Balance.
Jogging with that
outfit. He would jog.
With the sweatband you would have on. Yeah.
And he did a 5K or 10K, I don't remember which, and asked me to come down. And I just had my son, Luke, who and I pushed him in the baby jogger, and Lyle Lovett was on the start line. And so we got to know each other then. And then just over the years, I've just stayed in touch. I'll go out and play golf with him out at his little course where he lives. And you're right, man, stood the test of time
and still performs well in his 90s.
Yep.
And he's a testament to good karma for, because he used to, even when everybody associates him with the marijuana and all that. But, after every show, he would sign autographs around a bus and let people photograph.
Yep.
So police liked him in the end. Firemen, his good Samaritanism.
Yep.
So when the IRS...
Farm aid.
The IRS came and took his ranch, Darrell Royal of the
They all bought all these old...
Gave it back. You're not going to lie. All that Willie's given to Texas culture, and you guys are treating him shabbily.
Think about that, folks, right? You run into trouble with the IRS and you can't pay the tab. They make you sell it. Remember, he did the IRS tapes?
Yeah.
He made the IRS tapes. He would sell it on local television. But your friends come along and buy your ranch and your house and your car. And I'm sure he's thinking, well, that's very nice of you. Let's come up with a payment plan. I'll get this back. And they just turned right around and said, no, here's the keys back. And let's move on.
Beautiful Texas story that that group did that. We said, you're not putting Willie away.
What others, going back to the White Earp thing real quick, and then I'm going to let you go. But what other, what story, and you know this stuff, right? What is out there that's just, because I like the Wyatt Earp thing, I thought was crazy. Just all of the touch points and shit I didn't know. What's out there that hasn't been told that in your mind, you're like, how has nobody ever told this story? This is so crazy, so special, so needs to be told. Is there anything?
Yeah, there are a lot.
I'm sure.
But I don't think people, like here in Austin, you have Cesar Chavez Boulevard and many things named after Cesar. I don't think people really understand Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, meaning the United Farm Workers of the 60s, because these were not people coming over from Mexico. These were born American. He was born in Yuma, Arizona, Cesar Chavez, and simply wanted to make sure we had bathrooms, make sure we weren't spraying pesticides, make sure that we weren't being treated as farm animals, that were human beings. Right. And that he would, I once, Lance, talked to Paul Chavez, his son, a wonderful guy in California, and Paul said, my dad used to listen to big band music all the time, like Benny Goodman or whatever, Glenn Miller. But at one point, I was with him. He said, I got all those tapes. He had cassettes up the gazoo. This is the 60s, so the kids were into Jefferson Airplane or whatever. Right. I looked at them, and it was micro, Miles Davis, Savoy this night, Charlie Parker this night. Here's Cesar Chavez out in the farm fields going all over listening to the most modern jazz music humanly possible, and then taking the crucifix out in the field knowing the altar would bring in the workers. It's quite a pageant that took place in California in that era, that because you have to know you really have to know Spanish, I think, and understand that Odyssey. 19th century, probably I think more people need to know about, believe it or not, their names are ubiquitous, what did happen at Concord, Massachusetts, meaning not just the battles of Lexington and Concord, but how a little town developed. Ralph Waldo Emerson and Louisa May Alcott, Little Women, and Henry David Thoreau, Walden. Many things today were born out of this little think tank town of Concord, Massachusetts. You go there today and there are history trails and all. You don't capture the drum.
Well, Henley did a lot for it.
Henley does.
Woods, and
he's a warrior on that stuff.
Yeah.
Henley is a Texan who saved Massachusetts's Walden Pond, and he works hard on a lake, Caddo Lake on the Louisiana border. He's a real on the ground land, water, wetlands conservationist, not climate activist. He just, here's a place worth saving. I admire what he does a lot.
He's a bulldog. Have you been to the Sphere? They're doing that.
I haven't yet, but I'm going to see the Eagles.
I haven't been, and I guess.
Are you going to go to that one?
Well, they're starting their residency there, and by all accounts, this thing is just total mind fuckery. Like, it's that amazing.
It's supposed to.
I don't know how I didn't go to.
I was going to see the Dead when they were there.
Yeah, I'm not a big Dead guy. I love John Mayer. You know what I love about John Mayer? I love his resiliency. This guy doesn't give a shit. Right? This guy's uber talented. He was an easy target. He's just kept his head down, and
I think photography's helped him. He brings a camera up sometimes. Well, when you're traveling a lot, you have something to keep you. But the one part about Jerry Garcia, that many parts about him are interesting, he only had 4 fingers.
Wow.
He had lost a finger in an accident as a kid. So he was playing that guitar 4-fingered, And he's the kind of guy that could actually, David Grisman, a bluegrass guy, they can almost make instruments. He was classically trained on everything. Yeah. He could do anything, Garcia. The thought that John Mayer could come in and fill those shoes seemed to me not possible. Right. But it isn't Jerry Garcia. Nothing ever is but man, he does so well keeping the crowd.
I've never seen it. I've heard.
It's worth it. I was going to go see them, but I would like to go see. I saw the Eagles in Austin when they were here on that tour, and there wasn't one person left disappointed.
Wow.
And their strategy is to play.
Well, we should make a plan to go. Neither of us have been to the Sphere.
No,
which makes us just like the biggest losers.
It does,
because we love music as much as anybody. And that's apparently a can't miss.
Game-changing way. Yeah.
So we should make that plan. And I'm back here now, and you're here, and
Are you able to? Where do you ride now? Is the traffic affect you?
But look, there's a lot of. I get that question a lot. I don't ride very much. I still love to ride. I tell you, I went, and this is all true. I went and rode yesterday morning all alone. I still love riding. I love riding alone more than anything. I'll ride with other people. I'll do group rides. I'll ride with a buddy. But nothing makes me happier than leaving my house all alone, knowing where I'm going, and just being alone. And it could be, and it doesn't have to be. In the old days, it was 6 hours. I loved that too. Now it's 2 hours. But boy, I'm all alone. I'm out there, and the kind of shit that goes through my mind, the things I think about, I plan, I reflect, maybe sometimes listen to music. I suffer. I love suffering. Look, the riding in Austin isn't what it was when I moved here in 1989, but Austin's different. And I don't buy into this thing. Well, Austin's changed and keep on. Listen, we all chose to move to a really cool place.
Right.
And I chose to move back to a really cool place. So if you don't want anybody to come in and you want it to stay weird, well, then go live in some shithole.
I agree.
And then nobody will come.
And the food is so much better.
There's a lot of things, but
good food.
And here, so but what I was going to say was, there's, technology has been good, right? Mapping is great.
Yep.
I do a lot of stuff on a platform called Strava. Strava has a great feature called the heat map. So the heat map actually tells you there's 100 million active users on this platform. So it sees
100 million. Yeah.
It sees where people are going. So if they're finding little sneaky side routes they are going where cars are not going. Yeah. So I study the heat map. And when I travel, I really study the heat map. I'm like, okay, this is where people are going. I can input that route into my computer and go out for a ride. It tells me turn by turn. So I feel safe. I'm not too worried about cars. I still love it. Do I do it I do a lot of other stuff. I mean, I'm in the gym a lot more now. I'll swim.
There's nothing that you can, I guess you're describing kind of mindfulness, they call it on. Does any of your other workouts equal riding like that for that becoming full or whatever?
Look, because what I described to you, the way I feel when I'm out riding, that's therapy.
Yeah. Straight up.
That's church.
Yeah.
There's nothing, and I grew up doing all these sports, long distance runs, long open water swims, nothing, not even close to what I get, that peace and it's really progress on the bike. So it's an excellent question, but no.
Have you ever run over an animal on your bicycle?
Well, yeah, small ones, not
like
anything.
Like a squirrel?
Well, squirrels and, nothing big. I mean, if you hit anything bigger than a squirrel, that's going to start to could be a problem.
We can end with this. The one problem why the bison that used to be 60 million, we think, in North America got dwindled down to like 2,000 because the bison were everybody's enemy. Meaning the railroad companies hated the idea of a train at night running into they weigh a ton. You run into a herd of bison. So they would shoot the bison to keep them away from the railroad tracks. But the period of the telegraph going out west, the bison buffalo rub their back on the poles to scratch the itches of the flies and bugs, and they would topple it. So the telegraph started killing them off.
Wow.
And then the U.S. Army in the Indian Wars, as we call it, they were taking the subsistence food away from the enemy, from the natives. So they would have people just slaughter them. So it went something 60 million down to 1,500, all in the name of westward expansion.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's history, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And nobody knows it better than you. My friend, thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Lance. Great fun.
Yeah, it is.
I'll be your fill-in guy when there's an emergency.
This studio just sits right here. You live basically 5 minutes from here. Next week, Dave, you're listening back here. Next week, Doug's going to be, I've been thinking about this. I'm going to start a podcast. You guys mind if?
Yeah, really, I will. I'll be
believe me, people would. I mean, Gladwell's is huge.
Oh, that's a bit,
huge.
Well, you're killing it with this, so you're doing great, man. Proud of you.
Listen, here's, and we will end with this because this is everybody that's listening was all part of this. The world gave me a chance, right? And we've been buddies for decades. The world, you were there at the highest of highs. You were there at the lowest of lows. The world gave me a chance. And so that's the only reason. I mean, I tried different things and I'm half smart, but it doesn't happen if the world doesn't say, okay, we'll give you one more shot.
Hope you're feeling the love that's coming your way.
It is. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, man.
All right, brother. Thank you.